Hello,
Oh,
hello, New Zealand. We are back. Sorry, just caught, just having a drink out of my promotional cup. You've sold a few of these, haven't you, Simon?
I have. I have to say, I've been selfishly selling and occasionally giving away my solid ground mugs, but we're now having
Ah,
requests, Bob, coming in for the whole set.
I
People want the
know.
political playback. They definitely want McBlog, the family first mug, mugs for everyone.
We're going to have to set up a shop area in Amazon or something like that. Anyway, Happy New Year, Simon. Good to have you back. This is the 20th episode, and we've made it to our second year. So that's, two achievements. And the other thing is that, yes, it is Wednesday night because tomorrow is a public holiday, but perhaps you're traveling somewhere right now or heading home from work, then tune in. We've got a bit of a discussion coming up for you. And actually, Simon, speaking of that, we're probably going to have to do this next Wednesday as a one-off as well, because both of us are heading out later that week to the ARC conference in the UK, the Alliance for, what is it? The
That's what
Alliance for
you get so
Responsible
used
Citizens.
to. That's it. We get so used to using the acronym, the Alliance for Responsible Citizens. So
Yeah.
for those going, what? Basically, it's a huge conference. People like Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray, Constantine Christen, the
Yeah.
lady who founded the Michaelia School, the toughest school in the UK,
Yeah.
Katie Faust, who people will know.
Yeah.
And we believe that actually, Judeo-Christian, Western liberal values have a place.
So normally we're here on a Thursday night at 5, but just for this week and next week, it's going to be a Wednesday. And actually, while you're away, Simon, for part of that time, because you come back slightly after I do, we've got a couple of guest people sitting in your chair. So that's going to be very interesting. Don't worry, I will hold the job for you. I don't want you to be worried about that. Anyway,
The guests will be great. The guests will be great. I won't give away who it is, but
Yeah.
I can say to listeners, they're going to be great.
Okay, well, I'll give it away. It's Peter Williams and Rodney Hyde. They're having a week each as a turn. Anyway, let's have a look at the polls. The Talbot Polls Mills poll, which is the Labor private poll, apparently. The Courier Market Research poll, which is the taxpayer union, but national users for polling. And also the Roy Morgan poll I saw out last night. They're both basically saying that Labor has slightly increased above national, but most of them are within the margin of error. Two of them say that we would have a centre-right government. One would say we would now have a centre-left government. Look, as a politician, do you think they're taking too much notice of this? I mean, should National be worried? Oh, I can't hear you, Simon. You've disappeared. There you are.
Typical me.
Lovely.
Sorry.
No, that was great. I thought it was the most intelligent thing you'd said all year.
I could see someone coming down my driveway, and I knew they were about to ring the doorbell, so I put myself on mute before all you hear were bells. So, look, National will be worried. The centre-right bloc will be worried. They shouldn't be panicking, but let's be honest, where National in particular is polling is not good. That's not Gilder Lily. It's not good. In their
33%, 34.
Yep.
Yeah.
29, I think, with the Courier poll. Again, that's probably more outlying, but look, it should be stronger. They're a year into government. They've replaced one of the most, if not the most, unpopular governments, and yet it's not as strong as it should be. And they will be worried about this. They will be talking about it quietly in their offices, in the corridors. MPs, not all of them, but MPs notoriously get freaked very easily when it comes to polls. So, as I say, it's not good, but they don't need to panic. They just need to do things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hope they do. Okay. Look, we'll monitor the polls throughout the period, but I'm actually surprised that Te Pāti Māori haven't been doing slightly better, and I'm surprised that the Greens are still holding their sort of vote. I mean, one had them on 12%, I think, despite the fact that they had a terrible year last year. And may I just say, look, it's whether you agree with her politics or not, it's good to see Marama Davidson back and having recovered from, the cancer treatment and doing well. So, let's just acknowledge that. But I do want to look at the polling, this report that came out around the Treaty of Waitangi, and what it said was, well, if you read the Stuff report, they said Kiwis are largely united on wanting to see the treaty honoured. But then when you go to the Herald report, they say most New Zealanders believe respectful treaty race relations debate is important. So we actually had a look at the research. It's Horizon Research on behalf of the Human Rights Commission. They said that basically almost 80% of us want to see respectful discussion of the treaty and race relations. And you got to say, Simon, with 300,000 submissions on this issue, yeah, perhaps we can have a mature debate. And 90% believe human rights being protected in New Zealand's law and constitution is important. So there's some interesting little bits of data coming out of that. What was your reading on it?
Well, I thought it lacked depth, I have to say. I mean, encouragingly, people do want to discuss and debate, and that's positive. The positive, too, that people want to honour the treaty, that's fantastic. But when the tyre hits the road, what does that mean? And that's where the nub of this whole question around the Treaty of Waitangi is. What does it mean to honour it? And people have different views of that. A lot of Kiwis, I suspect, are very happy with the likes of treaty settlements and reparations being paid. They may not, and we'd have to ask them, but they may not be happy with a two-tiered system, which the likes of Te Pāta Māori is arguing for. So what does it mean to honour the treaty? So when I read through the Human Rights Commission report, I just found it lacked depth, to be honest. And then you've got all the irony of those trying to shut down the debate of the treaty while talking about how important it is. I mean, that's contradictory. And then, putting my little philosophical hat on it, it's very difficult to talk about the importance of human rights and then go on to start breaking things down on a race basis. Those two don't compute. So there's many more questions for me that come out of these dynamics, if you will. Yeah. Okay, well, that's one to watch. The other aspect of Waitangi Day is that tomorrow the Prime Minister is going to be with Ngāi Tahu at Unuku Marae near Akaroa, Canterbury. Apparently he spent a lot of his childhood there and took his own family there on holiday, so it holds a lot of sentimentality towards him. So he's not going up to Waitangi, but David Seymour is going to Waitangi. And there's going to be a lot of hostility towards him, which has been generated by media and Te Pāti Māori, etc. Who's made the smarter decision in your view? It probably is actually Seymour. He's a bit tone deaf at one level, like the iwi up in Waitangi itself have said you're not welcome, but he's quite prepared to go because he can see the politics in it and he will win from this. Doesn't matter if he turns up and gets to speak and it's all respectful, or he turns up and gets yelled and jeered at. Seymour wins on all and every count, and also shows, if you will, strength. Unfortunately, I think Luxon's made the wrong call. I understand why he's done it. He's probably been told by a security detail that it could be quite fraught. In his mind, I suspect he's wanting to disassociate himself from the treaty principles bill and all the heat around that. But I think it's the wrong move because ultimately, for most Kiwis, they'll see the Prime Minister, in effect, running away from what's one of our most important holidays in the year. Prime Ministers turn up to Waitangi Day, and he's not.
Yeah, although I did see the footage on the news of reminding us of when John Key turned up and was almost assaulted, and then Don Brash turned up and there was mud thrown at him. I mean, it's not a nice place to be. I was actually there 2 years ago, and look, even with some friction, it was still a very special place to be on Waitangi Day and going to that dawn service. But yeah, there's a lot of heat, unfortunately, and that's disappointing because you've got 300,000 submissions. This is obviously an issue that people want to talk about, whether they're heated about it or not. And I've listened to some of the submissions and there's been some good material coming out. So I think this is all part of the process. I mean, David Seymour has been clever in that he has always said, look, it's a discussion we need to have, and he is getting that discussion, even if it is going to be shut down later on. So, do you think he's going to be the winner out of all this? I mean, it's not reflecting in the polling. the polling isn't suggesting that he's winning from this.
He's holding his own for now from what we see on the polling. As you say, I mean, intuitively, you think that ACT would be growing its vote. It's not. But the weakening of National's vote, I think, is part of this. There are a lot of grumbles from party members around how National is operating, and not just around the Treaty Principles Bill. But as I said, I think for Seymour, Waitangi Day is going to be a win-win. You're absolutely right. Prime ministers in the past have had a terrible response. Not every time, but you remember Helen Clark was made to cry from actually quite abusive behaviour, physical attempts of attack. So at one level, it's completely understandable that Luxon's not going, but the politics is what matters here, and the politics looks like a prime minister not willing to stand up and engage. And he can make all the excuses that, look, Waitangi Days around the whole country, this was my family's holiday area. All of that makes absolute sense. But I think the simple politics, Bob, is the Prime Minister is running away from Waitangi.
Yeah, I mean, I've always argued that this is the Treaty Principles Bill is just the tip of the iceberg, that there's been a whole lot of other stuff like the dumping of He Puapua and the dumping of co-governance and the taking away of Māori wards and councils unless they have a referendum. And I actually heard a Māori leader today actually admit, look, the Treaty Principles Bill is just the tip of the iceberg. So it was good to get that admission. Anyway, let's move on. And of course, this was a big story. A newspaper in Israel, and then re-reported by the Times of Israel, which is quite a significant paper, that apparently we were vetting IDF service people coming into the country and finding out whether they were fighting in the war. Now, the Immigration New Zealand came out and said, no, that's not happening. If they're just on a visitor's visa. Ted Cruz, the Republican senator, latched onto this and said, well, what's New Zealand doing? But he was also pointing to the fact that John Minto was also having this seek out and expose IDF soldiers who may be holidaying in New Zealand. So in fairness to him, he was highlighting both. Winston Peters then pushed back and said, look, this is fake news, Ted Cruz, don't believe it. So he set the record straight. But the problem is that, unfortunately, we had this incident at the end of last year where Luxon said, well, under what was the court that said that he should be arrested? It was the
International Criminal Court, or the ICC.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, we posted this as well and we corrected it once Immigration New Zealand clarified what was going on. But it's still just in the back of my mind, I'm a bit concerned that there is some activism going on in the background, the fact that a few people have said, no, this is happening. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. I think I lean into what you've just said at the end, that, and I'd phrase it as, where there's smoke, there's fire. So let's be really clear. Accusations been made. Immigration New Zealand, the minister herself have made it really clear there is no profiling of Israeli citizens coming in. But there is just a niggling thought around this, and something's not quite right. So can't prove it, but something doesn't feel quite right here. Yeah. But the second element is, and I worry about the way that including Winston, our politicians have responded to Ted Cruz. Is very aggressive, very belligerent. I demand things be taken down. I think sometimes New Zealand forgets it's a very small country, and the US is very, very strong. And American politicians, like New Zealand politicians, have massive egos. So someone like Ted Cruz won't like being corrected. It is quite a belligerent tone coming out of Winston, Seymour, and others. And I just think in terms of the new Trump administration, New Zealand and its leaders would do well to tread more carefully and gently. So you could have called Cruz out and just said, look, we don't believe this to be right. But almost shirt fronting him, I don't know if it goes well, because it just draws American attention to the fact that New Zealand has been generally quite hopeless when it comes to supporting Israel, even before the terrorist attack of October 7, we've got Luxon saying that he'd happily arrest Israel's prime minister, and having called Trump a whole lot of things in the past, as has Seymour. And it's like, yeah, guys, don't draw American attention to all our failings. This is not a good strategy.
Yeah. Okay, look, just a reminder to our audience that normally we would be taking your comments, but we're unable to access those, so we'll get that sorted. But yeah, put those comments in the comment section, because I'm sure there'll be some discussion amongst those of you who are watching. Right, let's move on to the next topic. And the Law Commission have just released this consultation paper on hate crime. We're back to this hate stuff. Simon, I mean, this is not hate speech. This is now hate crime. So what's going on here?
Personally, well, first and foremost, I'm disappointed that this has come through. There's no need for it, from my thinking. The government was not forced to put this forward. There's no requirement. So why it is there is a mystery to me. One of my many frustrations with supposedly centre-right parties. They will make the argument there's a difference between hate crimes and hate speech. So the difference between saying something which offends someone and actually doing if you will, a physical crime that causes harm. Personally, I think it's dancing on the head of a pin, Bob. I think we know enough people in society today. We call them woke, of course. They believe that using the wrong pronoun or looking at them the wrong way causes them as much harm as someone hitting them. So I think you will see an attempt by all those usual groups, progressives and others, to suggest that certain forms of speech, thought and belief are effectively a crime. So we're going to have to fight this as we fought the hate speech legislation, and as I was in the last weeks of Parliament fighting against introducing more, it was mainly around religion actually, more reasons to prosecute people for having a different opinion on one's politics, gender, religious belief and so forth. So it's nuts.
Okay, but is this a smokescreen? Because it's not hate speech, which even Labor kicked for touch, realised it was just too hot a potato, and hopefully realised it was a dumb idea. But now it's hate crime. What's the difference between hate speech and hate crime? I mean, yeah. I
think that's my point. I think badly articulated at the start. I don't think there is a genuine distinction. They will try to make one. Yeah. That hate speech is literally about what you say, and a crime is if I go out and do something terribly physically violent because of a hateful reason. But there's two problems with that. I think speech can be, we do see it in woke literature and perspectives that speech is a criminal act. It's akin to physical violence. So I think they'll conflate the two. And the other is a lot of crime, if you will, is motivated by hate in inverted commas. So how are we going to discern this? And what's the difference? If you murder someone, you've murdered someone. The motivations are interesting, but if you've done the crime, there should. I don't understand it. I just think it's a bit of a Trojan horse if we're not careful.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's move on. Next topic is that once again, the New Zealand Herald. Oops. I got the wrong topic for there. Okay. We'll just cancel that. You can tell it's the first day back at school, eh?
We're all a bit rusty. Well, I failed on solid ground yesterday morning. My tech failed on me. It's like,
did it? Oh, okay. Oh, well, that's good. I don't feel so bad. I gave up. I must have got distracted halfway through doing these titles, so we won't have any titles. That's it. I've cancelled titles. Cancel culture.
You've killed the title. You've euthanized the titles.
I have. And speaking of euthanasia, I love the segue there. So the Herald, a patient struggled to find a place to die because of hospice opposition. Apparently the patient had no home to go to, or I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But Isaac Davison, the reporter from the New Zealand Herald, I mean, last month, there was this one. Patient had assisted death in a farm paddock after being refused procedure at a rest home. There's a bit of a common theme there. And then the month before, he's talking about a gag on doctors discussing assisted dying with patients should be changed. So in other words, taking away one of the key precautions that doctors don't suggest euthanasia and put that in the minds or say that that's a that's a good option, which carries a huge amount of weight from a medical professional. So with this latest story, what was your reading of this particular one, Simon? I mean, this is basically to put pressure on hospices, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's start with this particular one, and then we can go broader. So, as people know, there's been a review of euthanasia, and one of the many recommendations is that hospices, retirement villages must allow patients to be euthanized on site. And there's many issues with that. Conscience rights, for example, that if a hospice or the facility doesn't want to do it, then why should they be forced? Which is ironic, of course, as I keep pointing out to people. The second is, for hospices in particular, euthanasia is the antithesis of what they want to do. And when you're in a hospice dying, many people just want to know they're going to be cared for to the end. And if euthanasia is forced into these areas, there'll always be that niggling question, well, are they coming to cure me or kill me? But this particular story, and then good on Isaac Davison at one level, Bob, because he's pretty much the only reporter covering the topic. But he reports this, and if you read the headline and even start reading the article, it seems like, oh, this person just had nowhere to die. Well, actually, if you read it, this gentleman was receiving palliative care, hospice care, in his home. But the family clearly didn't want him to be terminated in his home, probably because they didn't want the bad memory. He has a family, Bob, which means that the families will have homes, but they didn't want to go there. No, this family wanted to force the death of their father onto an unwilling hospice. And then we have this puff piece, and I'm sorry to say that to Isaac because I generally respect his work, but this puff piece in the Herald making it sound like a terrible drama. Yeah.
And he says, the heading is terminal patients say hospices and rest homes refusals to have euthanasia on site, assisted death, they call it to sound nice, makes their last days stressful and difficult. Apparently, that's the measure of how they die. And they say, hospices say palliative care and assisted dying cannot go hand in hand, though one hospice in Auckland has gone against the tide. And I'm sorry to say that's my local one. But it does seem like there's a bit of a campaign. I mean, the fact that I thought you couldn't have euthanasia in a farm paddock. I thought it had to be in a residence or not in a public place, because the danger with this one, if it's in a farm paddock, is who else observed it happening? Were there children there?
I don't think there's anything specifically in the law that prevents the wear. I think there was the expectation that it would be done, quite quietly and privately, but now we have it in farm paddocks, on beaches, which again, media that has touched on these topics does celebrate that. So that's the flip side of what's happening is it's good there's some coverage, not enough of what's actually happening. Isaac Davison, to his credit, was the one who highlighted the whistleblowers, highlighted the fact that, someone was terminated without a translator. He's highlighted some of the problems, but you can't help but feel there is an agenda running through most of these stories to try and expand euthanasia. And again, I think misrepresent, actually, Bob, what's happening. I mean, I just don't buy that they don't have places they could make their own choices about. They're trying to force themselves onto others.
That's right. Okay, let's move on. Helen Clark is very upset because Belgium has a right-wing government. And she says this era of resurgence of right-wing populism. Apparently populism is a negative word when she doesn't win the most votes. In many Western democracies is deeply worrying. Societies are being torn apart by divisive rhetoric. Oh my gosh. Now, just before you comment on this, once your blood pressure comes down. So this was an article recently in the Telegraph that across 70 countries in the last 12 months, basically the world is swinging right. The left is more unpopular than at any time since the Cold War, except in Britain, although I would say Britain is swinging right at the moment because of the shambles of Starmer's parliament. But here it is in graph form. The blue line is centre-right or right-wing governments. The red line is left-wing. And it's not so much that right-wing governments, parties are sort of improving. It's that left-wing parties are going through the floor because everyone's realising that their policies are so bad, aka Joe Biden. So, what was your response to this tweet, Simon?
Well, it's typical Helen Clark that everyone's wrong, only she is right. That's the first thing. And secondly, classic leftist arrogance that they're the ones born to rule. It's one of the funniest things I found in Parliament. As a centre-right politician, Bob, we were often referred to as, you've privileged, you feel that you're born to rule, which we never did. No. In fact, it's the left-wingers. And this is what Helen Clark's saying here, that basically, unless her and her left-wing mates are running countries, everything's horrendous. And at the end of the day, a lot of these places are not. Trump was democratically elected. Meloni in Italy was democratically elected. Milei in Argentina, democratically elected, so on and so forth. But you can't handle it because actually they don't believe, I had to really push this point home, Helen Clark doesn't actually believe in democracy, nor did the likes of Jacinda and her mates. They believe that they should get to rule and make all the decisions, which is why a lot of the basic human rights get thrown out the window when the left wing are in power.
Yeah, and we will come back to Jacinda shortly. You'll be looking forward to that. Hungary was the other European country that has sort of led the way in terms of showing how right-wing politics are actually very good and successful. And of course, that's why we have a good close relationship with some of their policies, pro-family policies, which is quite impressive. All right, just a bit of self-promotion of Family First. We did put out a media release in the middle of January calling for the ending of prescribing puberty blockers. Now, this was on the back of not only Trump with the executive order saying that there would be no more chemicalizing and castrating of young people in the United States or funded by the government, but Queensland also has stopped puberty blockers in Australia. So there's been this trend around the world, the UK, the Cass report, in Europe, which sort of led the way on the whole puberty blockers. But in New Zealand, they've been dragging the chain. Now, you and I did have a Zoom meeting with the Ministry of Health considering this consultation. And the key point we're making, isn't it, Simon, is that, and I want you to comment on this because you were chair of the House Select Committee at one stage, so you would have seen some of the ideology coming through. Our argument was simply, if you prescribe something, the first thing you should do is check that, one, it's effective, and secondly, it's safe. And the Ministry of Health themselves, in their first review last year, admitted that they can't prove it's effective and they can't prove it's safe. So why are we prescribing it? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the fundamental problem. I mean, you're right. Around the world, most jurisdictions are either reducing access to or outright banning puberty blockers because of just what you articulated, Bob, which is there's no evidence that they work and there's no evidence they're safe. Now, the corollary is true. There's not stunning evidence to say these are ultra dangerous. There's indications that they are more problematic than not, but the research is still developing. But this is the extraordinary thing here in New Zealand. It doesn't matter if it's the minister or, as you say, when we sat with the Ministry of Health, they admit openly there's no good data. As I say, the data we do have does indicate that they're not efficacious, as in they don't really work as well as they say, and they are probably coming with harm. But despite that admission, they are still prescribing these drugs. And just for a moment, if I might, we don't prescribe drugs in this country unless they're proven to be really, really safe. The precautionary principle, I can say, as you say, chairing the health committee when it comes to pharmaceutical products, MedSafe and so forth, they take it really seriously, but not with puberty blockers. And the real kicker, these are drugs being given to children. Yeah. So in effect, the pro-trans lobby, whatever you want to call them, gender-affirming care physicians are basically taking drugs which are not designed for their use on children and using them on children as an experiment. I think there's a definition for that, and it's something like child abuse. Yeah, just putting that out there for a moment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's doing something unnatural in terms of blocking puberty, which every one of us goes through as human beings. Simon, can you just explain for the audience, the puberty blockers are off-label. What does that mean?
So most drugs are designed for a very particular reason. So you put me on the spot. Basically, I'm trying to think the simplest way. It'll be designed to treat one thing. So obviously, the puberty blockers are basically a hormone treatment.
Yeah.
They were designed not to stop puberty. I suspect they were designed to facilitate and help some hormone growth issues, for example.
Yeah, and precocious puberty as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a drug is on label for what it's meant to do. So it's meant to attack lung cancer, or it's meant to help you with your glaucoma or something.
Right.
But then often with drugs or pharmaceutical products, people find, actually, there's other benefits. And not to be a bit crass, but Viagra did not start out for the use that it's now known for. So they find over time there's a off-label usage. There's a way to use it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we mean by off-label. So a drug not specifically designed for the use. So now it comes down to the doctor to go, I'm using this drug off-label. They need to fully understand what it does and doesn't do, and they need to make sure the person completely understands the risks. So how does a child consent to a drug that's got no evidence?
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Very good explanation, Simon. That was well done. I can see your teacher wife has been having an influence on you. Right. Let's keep going.
I'm just waiting for all the complaints that someone from Family First mentioned Viagra. Just putting that out there.
Now, school lunches, a lot of problems because this national system that has come in, well, it's not National Party, it's actually David Seymour's baby, so to speak, but apparently some schools didn't get their lunches on time and they had to go out and buy pizzas and other things. This was the report.
The beef bolognese arrived on time at Auckland's Macaulay High School today, but yesterday was a disaster, says the principal. Students normally eat here at 11, but the food didn't turn up until 2:30.
A lot of pressure had to be put on them to actually get food yesterday.
And at one point we had to go up the road ourselves to the local fruit shop and actually buy food for the students because we just were not confident that the food was going to arrive on time.
The 6-year-old program has been remodelled by the coalition government. The number of students it feeds hasn't changed, but $130 million a year has been saved by using bigger suppliers. The program's now run by a consortium of companies led by British multinational Compass. As schools return, this week has been its first test.
I think part of the problem is we had no contact from anyone ever about where we wanted it delivered to or what it was going to look like. There's just been silence.
This Rotorua principal also had a late delivery yesterday.
We knew then we'd have to do something because we couldn't wait till 1:30. So I went and bought some apples and some muesli bars to just tide them over. But the truck was even later and didn't arrive until 5 to 2.
At Auckland's Henderson Intermediate, the principal ordered pizza when lunches didn't arrive on time.
Yeah, okay. Simon, before you comment on this, I mean, I just have a simple question. What were these kids eating for the last 6 weeks? I mean, I understand that some parents are irresponsible and can't even prepare a basic breakfast or a lunch. But I wonder whether we shouldn't target the family in that situation and give them the assistance and the coaching that they need. And I'm assuming that principal from Rotorua got the apples and the muesli bars, not for the whole school, surely. And pizza's a pretty good lunch, actually. I wish I was a student at that school. Anyway, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose two tracks of thought. One is clearly the system is broken at the moment, and that's a problem. And, the officials all involved will have to fix it. So given that they are feeding lunches into schools, it's not working. And I know that from personal experience here as through the schools at the moment. Food.
Yeah, what is it? It's 170,000 meals, is it? Or something like that? It's a phenomenal amount that they're doing.
Yeah, so logistically there's problems and they need to be fixed, to be fair on those principals and of course the kids, they're expecting the meals. But taking a step back, I'm, aligned to what you're saying. I mean, at the end of the day, I see it's the parents' responsibility to feed their children. And, we've allowed ourselves to not only hand that responsibility over to the state, we give away our taxpayer monies to do it. And it just doesn't seem right. And you see this, I've spoken about it before, this ever encroaching hand of the state in all that we do. I mean, when did it become normal for schools to feed our own children? So I think, parents need to take some more responsibility. Probably means you get some better food overall. I mean, heavens above. It just shows what happens when you take away parental rights.
And you've never forgotten to give your children their lunch when they go to school, have you, Simon?
Oh, well, Bob knows I have. Yes, I was chatting to him about it yesterday. Yeah, I mean, but this is a funny thing. Gosh, I sound like an old man, I probably am, but I remember in school many years ago, if you'd forgotten your lunch, the school would kick in, and there's always going to be needs. And there's no problem. One of the charities Rach and I support is a breakfast club. There's needs. But what has happened is now there's sort of the expectation that the school will provide breakfast and lunch for your child, for all children, by and large. And so the parents go, oh, okay, I don't need to do that anymore. The next step will be dinner. The next then will be, well, we have to fund them the uniforms. I mean, when are parents, put it bluntly, Bob, going to wake up and realize that they're not actually parenting their children anymore? The children are being taken care of by others. And I just don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and in fairness, that report that I showed you was from the end of last week there, and they found 3 schools. I haven't heard any complaints this week. I think there would have been some anecdotal evidence of some schools where it played up. But given the number of schools, given the fact that it's the first week of a major national program, I would hesitate to find any organisation that gets it perfectly right 100% of the time on such a grand scale. So, in fairness.
Yeah, I am aware actually of I am aware of another school in the last 24 hours that hasn't. But you're right. You got to situate that in the wider scheme. And look, let's be clear: media, mainstream or legacy media, are more than happy to slam the government.
Well, they hate this program. They hate this program.
They hate absolutely, and they hate the program because it's come out of the coalition government.
Yeah,
they didn't.
And
hate
out of
the
David Seymour.
left-wing government. Exactly right.
They only like David Seymour when
that.
he tweets against a Republican senator like Ted Cruz. That's the only time the media likes him. Anyway, speaking of another politician and an interesting tweet, this is Simon Watts, one of your... Was he an ex-colleague? Was he a national when you were there, or did he come in?
Yeah,
he was.
I think it was his first term. It was his first term when I was there.
So he's announced that we're going to get our emissions... reduce our emissions, and we're going to stop cows farting by another 4%. But what's interesting in this tweet, for those who don't understand, is if you look at the heart, that's how many people liked the tweet, 47. And out the far left-hand side, the little speech bubble is how many people commented, which is over 1,000. Now, this is called ratioed. And basically the rule is that generally if the comments exceed the likes, people are pushing back. This one has been ratioed majorly, 50 people who like it and 1,000 comments, and only 50 people liked it despite more than 72,000 people reading it. But anyway, why is the centre-right government continuing to punish what I think are our farmers and our industries in the name of climate alarmism, Simon?
Look, I don't fully understand. I think it's the wrong decision. Let's put that out there right away. The targets which this government has set are higher, repeat that, higher than what Greens and Labour had us doing. And I think I saw it was at the Taxpayer Union. So I'm saying this for people because I didn't do the numbers myself, but it's going to cost over 4 years something like $12,000 per household. So this is a huge cost billion. On you and I. Yeah, massive amounts of money that are going effectively offshore. And, part of it for me goes, I don't think it actually does change anything. It doesn't change anything. So it just seems ridiculous. I think people are angry and frustrated, and I can only assume it's because the government's captured by its officials around this, and maybe it just means that their life, when they go off to these Davos or other conferences, get to feel smug because we're trying to sort of waggling here as if it's like hey, we're really cool, look what we're doing, but it affects real people on the ground. And to reach those targets means that agriculture, the backbone of our economy, has to be drawn into it. And that comes with enormous costs. So, yeah, New Zealand, Luxon, Watts and others will feel very happy going to Paris climate conferences, but I don't think, as via that tweet, New Zealanders are going to be happy at all.
No, Federated Farmers says basically they're signing New Zealand up to a decade of planting pine trees on productive farmland, which is certainly the case. And of course, on the back of Trump pulling America out of the whole Paris Accord as well, it was kind of like really bad timing for the government. All right, we're just about out of time. I just want to cover three very quick things. Now, firstly, I'll just do this one. I've actually done a McBlog for this and it's coming out on Friday, but just to warn parents that the RSE program, the guidelines we told were removed. It was part of the coalition agreement, but parents are telling us and showing us evidence that some schools are still pushing it because there is a vacuum. There's nothing in its place yet. And so we want to encourage parents to check their school. This image, Simon, I'd like you to explain it. Politicians voted to give personhood to that mountain on the left, but they don't recognise the baby human being on the right as a person. What are politicians thinking?
I don't think they really are thinking. I mean, to be fair, I was in Parliament, I think, when it was Chris Finlayson. So I was in Parliament, I knew that. I think it was Chris Finlayson who first introduced this making an inanimate object a person. When he
it was Wanganui River first, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's an absurdity. It's a philosophical and moral absurdity, is that a human child has no rights. It can be killed right up to birth and after, but a lump of stone and dirt is now a person. And it comes with a second absurdity that then we have to have a board of people to speak on behalf of the mountain. And you go, well, and I remember raising this actually when I was in Parliament, more in private. It was like, well, why don't you just appoint a board of people to represent this lump of stone? And I know people have animistic and vitalistic beliefs of what is in the mountain and so forth, and that's perfectly fine for them. But for the rest of us, just appoint a board to run it like you would any park. But it just highlights the absurdities. And it's very sad. And you'll see more of it because the lawyers love it. The lawyers love it, Bob. They think it's just so wonderful and novel. Just be careful if you kick the mountain, you might be done for assault.
Okay, and I want to know the pronouns, personal pronouns. The last one is compulsory viewing at the O'Connor household over the extended weekend coming up. That is the documentary entitled Prime Minister. And this was just a little bit of the interview which Jacinda Ardern did at the festival by Deadline Studio. I don't know who the marketers were who thought up that name, Deadline. But anyway, here's what she said. It's interesting what she said about this whole documentary and how it came about.
I think the reason that, the film is so intimate and personal is because actually predominantly, the person following me a lot of the time was my husband. He, in 2017, when I became the leader of the Labour Party, he just picked up his phone one day and started filming. And we didn't talk about why or what would happen with that. I think we both knew that we were on a journey that we didn't know where it would lead, and it felt important to capture. So as much as you can see in the film that I was relatively reluctant some of the time, I'm glad that he did.
Okay, I haven't watched it. I'm not sure if I will, but look, I know for a fact that if a camera is on you, people act differently. And there's a kind of a show. Now, my understanding is that Clark started filming basically from the time that Winston put her in power. So is this going to be a normal documentary, Simon? Is it compulsory viewing for the O'Connor household?
Well, definitely no to that. I think bad timing for Jacinda and the film. That earlier trajectory you showed about the rejection of left-wing politics is happening. And I think actually the pitch, Jacinda's, like Trudeau, like Harris and Biden, their hyper-emotional pitch worked, 5-6 years ago, but people are sick of it now. So actually I don't think it will be well watched. I just would make one other observation. And look, to be fair, Clark Gayford does work in film and television, so there is an awareness. But is it an arrogance? I've been struggling to find the right word, but there's a real presumption that from the first day that you become leader of the opposition and then prime minister, that you film everything that's happening in anticipation that someone will want all that film. That, all politicians have a certain alpha profile and a strong ego, but the idea that you are filming most days in anticipation that someone will want to turn that into a film, that's real chutzpah there. That's real arrogance.
I have seen one little excerpt where she's reading papers in bed. I kind of think I really don't want to see that. I just have a warning for you, Simon, though. Rachel doesn't own a little camcorder, does she?
No, I hope not. That's right. But I mean, to put it that way, not that I'm as nowhere near. Of course, that's not my personality. But do you imagine if you or I filmed ourselves for a year in anticipation that someone's going to turn it into a movie? That's exactly. That's the first thing. But that's a real presumption, isn't it? Think about it. And I also, when you think about it, what parts are they including in the documentary? Is it the good parts, the parts where it elicits sympathy for her? Is it going to be the parts where she makes some contradictory decisions which really racked people up, like, there's two classes of people? That's what I'll be interested to see if that's included as well. I'd be stunned. I'd be stunned if it's anything but highly curated to keep to that hyper-emotionalism. And let's be really clear, Ardern, like Trudeau, like Harris, these guys are being turfed out. And Starmer in the UK, Albanese in Australia, the tide's turning against them. People are sick of it. And you can term that, people will term that populist, but they are sick of it. And they're sick of having their rights undermined. They're sick of being told what to believe. And they're sick of non-performance. That's the other thing. There's just, anyway, you got me started. I better pull back. Calm down.
Yep, okay. No, all good. Good timing. We are out of time. So thank you, Simon. Great show to start the year. I think we did pretty well, probably about a 4 out of 10. So the only room for improvement. We will be back. And just a reminder, it'll be next Wednesday, simply because we're both later in the week flying up to the UK for the ARC conference. So next Wednesday night, join us, but then we'll be back to the normal Thursday night. But anyway, thank you, Simon. Have a great weekend. And to the rest of you, have a great weekend. And we will see you next week.